Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another MEC session here where we're going to have a bit of a Q&A following on from the Basic Auth deprecation session. If you haven't already seen that, you should probably listen to that one first. But I'll reintroduce myself. I'm Greg Taylor. I'm the PM running the project here at Exchange, for Exchange at Microsoft. Getting towards the end of a three-year project where we've been trying to secure our customers and protect their data. So listen, I'm quite happy to take questions, answer questions. I can talk a bit about stuff again. I can answer some of the questions that pop up in chat. So why don't I try and address a few of these that I can see in chat from the session earlier this morning. I think there were a couple that remained unanswered. Or if anyone has a question, please pop your hand up and we can just come straight to you, or I can just spend my time trying to read your team's questions before the chat disappears out of sight. Peter, you have a question.
Yeah, hello.
Hey.
Thank you for. I already put it into the chat. We
great.
are extremely worried. We have hundreds of customers that we're helping via PowerShell. This has schools, and we are setting programmatically managing teams, including their unified groups.
Okay.
And so far, we used a thread-based authentication by XO PowerShell version 2. And since recently, the set unified group commandlet disappeared. It's simply not possible any longer to set an email address or change an email address. And typically, then the Exchange guys say, why don't you... Can I finish or not?
Somebody, I think, is unmuted and interrupting you, Peter. Okay. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I'm sure somebody will take care of that. Yep, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'm almost done. So some Exchange colleagues of yours said, well, go to Graph. And of course, we are in Graph. But Graph currently does not allow one to change email addresses for unified groups. What's even worse, you can also not change auto subscription of a group. All of this has been changed recently, and the only way currently to do it is by basic authentication, which I totally agree with you is horrible. I'm not in any way wanting you to keep this basic auth, and I think you're doing a great job getting rid of it. But there must be an alternative, and the issue that in Graph it has not been possible to change email addresses is known since years, but nothing happened so far.
Right. So I'm going to ask if any of my colleagues and friends on the phone might have a better answer, because I'm not terribly familiar with the problem, but it sounds an awful lot like what you're saying is we've just removed functionality from Exchange Online PowerShell.
Correct.
So whether are you talking about the V2 module?
Yes.
Okay, that setting should be back. I know there is some complications, Greg, that if those calls get proxied through Graph, and if they don't, or if something happens, those do get removed. But I thought that commandlet was back in place, Peter.
Unfortunately, not.
It's still not.
It's still not there, and it's a catastrophe for us. I mean, we're just really desperate, because if you see, I mean, this manual thing, to prolong this basic auth until December, that's okay for one tenant, but we can't go through all our 500 tenants into it. Yeah. So
let me. I'm going to ping you on the side and give you an email address to follow up on.
Yeah, please. Thank you very much. I'd really appreciate. If there is any alternative, we are happy with any other way of doing it. Yeah. We are programmers, we're developers. We have no issue with using Graph, using PowerShell, using whatever you tell us, whatever authentication method is available. But currently, unfortunately, it's only basic auth. And we'd be very happy.
Sure, Peter. So it sounds like Rob sounds like is aware of this, and I'm sure some of the others are too. It seems very odd to me that the auth type has any impact whatsoever on the functionality.
Yeah.
It's the way those calls get made. It's slightly different, right? We went through enhancing a handful of those early on in the V2 process. Mm-hmm. And then the remainder, in order to get them, they're kind of converted, so they proxy through Graph. But that is because it is still in a preview. The PowerShell V2 module is still in preview. Mm-hmm. Some of those commandlets have come and gone, unfortunately, because of complications. We'd rather, unfortunately, pull it than have it cause more problems for you, right? Where you have to call into support and go, hey, I just wiped out all my, Microsoft 365 groups.
Yeah.
So that is part of the preview process and part of that module. So I do apologize about that but I've got I got a separate chat window up, Peter, and I'm going to give you an email address. I want you to
that will be
send
fantastic.
that and CC me
on. You have my email address? I'm gonna type it.
I'm just gonna ping in.
He'll ping you, Peter, and Rob, keep me in the loop on that, because we are not changing our plan for Basic Auth here. We need to fix the commandlet or whatever it is.
Yeah,
we need to get
if you do this, wonderful, Greg.
We'll do whatever we. Okay, all right. There you go, Peter.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Okay. Who else got a hand up? So Todd, I think you're next. Go for it, Todd.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. One regarding the PowerShell module, because 2.0.5 is the current general release. Is that correct? And everything after is preview. But in order to get to V2, we've got to upgrade from 2.0.5 to one of those previews. Is that correct? Because I'm seeing messages when we try to connect that says, "Oh, you've got to upgrade to your version."
Yes, that would be a preview version, which is 2.06 or 2.07. I'd have to go back out and look real quick. Haven't looked in a minute. But and yes, those are preview versions, and we're pushing through that to get past preview.
Okay, and will that be prior to the October 1 date, or no?
I don't know. I'm not a part. I work with that team. I'm not a direct part of that team. But we should have something on that. And okay. I will find out. It's nothing I can announce today. So
yeah,
great.
So there's actually an
There you go.
I'm sorry. There's actually there's actually an Ask the Experts for for manageability team. I think it's later today or maybe tomorrow morning. I would absolutely suggest you go there. They actually just had the session where they announced that the 2.x various things are going to be renamed into 3.0 to make kind of like a clean break for everybody to go to 3.0, and all of that should happen within a few weeks here. So there's going to be one target for everybody, go to 3.0, and you're going to be on the latest. But yeah, there's a Q&A that's coming later
I just
today.
Put it's tomorrow.
It's tomorrow. Okay.
You're talking the roundtable for Exchange Admin Center and Manageability. I just threw the link in the chat for everybody. So thank you for that. I wasn't sure if we could talk about that. So thanks for filling in that gap for me.
It would be nice to see something that hasn't been in preview for almost a year. That would be usable and get us beyond this hump. The other question I had was transitioning our automation scripts that connect to Exchange Online. Is it recommended to use secrets or CBA? Or does it matter? I know secrets has an inherent, an inherent, security issue. So CBA is what I'm seeing from some people here in the chat.
So not being a developer, maybe somebody else would jump in here as well, but there are a multitude of different flows that are available, and just general secret in some ways is, you're right, not particularly strongly recommended. There are alternate flows, but was there a specific protocol or app you're thinking of, or is this
No, I was just thinking about connectivity, so we can, move away from the basic auth, which would be better, the better option. Would it be the secret or CBA? And it seems like,
yeah, but it also sort of rather depends on the protocol that we're talking about here, right? Because it's, you can do CBA with active sync, and you can do, I would say there's a multitude of potential scenarios there, right? So I'm not wanting to sort of dodge that, but I'm not sure I sort of can. I'm not sure there's a singular answer that I can give. Maybe somebody else, one of the other Microsoft folks, has a view that they want to offer.
Hey Greg, it's Tim.
Hey Tim.
Hey, yeah. So I posted this in the chat. What I kind of see coming through here is two things. For unattended access, where you don't want to have to deal with MFA and conditional access, then the enterprise apps and certs work very well for that situation. Being able to kind of set up that one-to-one. The other option, if you decide to use like a local password secret, is to do something like combine it with conditional access MFA bypass, but then also used name locations, so that you can try to secure the access there. Right. So it's kind of a balancing act between, especially if you want to run it unattended. How do you secure it, store it, and then access it in the non-basic auth, in the basic auth realm? Those are the two things. Those are the two scenarios that I see the most of.
okay. Thank you.
Okay, is that you good, Todd?
I'm good. Thank you.
All right, Peter Forster, you're next, sir.
Hi, this is Peter from Austria speaking. I just have a quick question about the chart that was showing during the session about the time frame. There was a time frame between January and April, I think, with exclusion mentioned there. Do you have any information what exclusion means here?
Yeah. So
exceptions. Yeah, correct.
There we go. So let me address this for you. So in this time frame here, as Perry Clark, if you listen to our keynote this morning, was asked the same question, and I'll try and answer this question for you clearly. There are a number of customers who operate critical infrastructure that people in their country rely on, and for whatever number of reasons, critical infrastructure customers who are not quite ready. We know who they are. We've been working with them, and they may require a little more time. They have been granted a little more time because of the nature of the kind of stuff they do, and we're working with them, and I have no intention of seeing any of them still using Basic Auth by April the 1st. But that's the small dotted line on here, which is marked as exceptions. If you're one of those customers, you will have had the message in your message center post telling you that. If not, you will get December 31st like everyone else.
Yeah, okay. That's fine. Yeah, thanks for clarifying this. I was not at the keynote, so didn't hear.
Okay, very good.
Okay.
So I hope that kind of answers it. And I think the other point made in the keynote was, and I'll reiterate the point here. There are people using email and Basic Auth for the most. Some might argue email is not the right platform for some of the things that our customers do and use with email, because it is by nature of how it works, it's a store and forward type operation. It is not real time, but customers use it as though it is. They depend on us to have it there. If we just turned off Basic Auth unilaterally, it would be pretty disastrous for some customers. And some of the stories I've heard and talk about sometimes are quite alarming. So we hope everyone's going to be ready by September 30th, frankly. If they're not, then we give them 3 more months until the end of December. There are very few customers who are going to get any leeway beyond that point. And in fact, having more time, sorry, Peter, I didn't ask, but just having more time isn't really something to be proud of as a customer.
I understand, yeah.
If you are the kind of customer that says, I really need until, June 2023, which, believe you me, I get asked, I'm gonna in my sarcastic slight way, which say, what have you been doing up to this point? Right? You know, if you really haven't seen this coming, then you're not paying attention, right? Or you left it too late. And every day that goes by is a security risk. I talk to customers every week who get breached by Basic Auth, and I point out to them they've already been breached. And that is not a good place to be. So let's get it wrapped up as quickly as we can. Okay.
I'm fully with you. Yeah. Thanks for that clarification.
All right. Mike.
Hey, Greg. I put my question in the chat, but I want to raise my hand and ask. The monthly report that we're getting in the message center, I see 24 Exchange Active Sync Basic Auth connections, but
yes,
when I go over to Azure sign-in logs and filter by client app and legacy authentication clients, Active Sync, I see thousands of users there. So how do I define those specific 24 users, or do I have a bigger problem since I'm seeing thousands of users in the sign-in logs?
Well, when you look in the sign-in logs, the question is whether you're looking at modern auth connections or basic auth connections. And what we're reporting to you in the message center are basic auth connections, right? So I'm not interested in Active Sync clients that are already using modern auth at this stage, right? That will show up for you in Azure AD sign-in reports. Great. All I'm interested in is basic auth. So when you go and look in the Azure AD sign-in reports and you filter by client app, if you filter it to what was the blog post, I think, or the screenshot, it says, you know, modern and browser and modern apps. That means they're using modern auth. Under legacy auth protocols, if you just select their Active Sync, you're going to see, I would hope, the same 24 users that we see. They're the ones that are using basic auth. They're the ones that are going to be impacted.
Now that's where I am selecting Exchange Active Sync, but I'm seeing thousands there.
Are you only selecting Exchange Active Sync?
Yeah.
You're not selecting anything else at the same time?
No, I just put a screenshot there in the chat as well.
Oh, right. Okay, let's have a look at that. Okay.
And we've had multiple support cases open on this, and we can't get a definitive answer of who those 24 users are.
Okay. Then what you should do is, Mike, we need to figure out, you're welcome to email me, right? And I will tell you I can't tell you who the users are. You're welcome to email me, grtaylor@microsoft.com. He put that out there. Who knows? But you're welcome to just drop me a line, right? And let's see if we can figure that out, right? And I can't tell you who the users are. I don't get to see which users in your tenant use Basic Auth for privacy reasons, right? But I can give you a reference to those users that will hopefully help you identify who they are.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
So Adam, this is Kurt. Are you saying that you don't see the actual user at all in that particular Active Sync user agent in the line? You don't see that at all?
I think he's saying he sees way more users than we think he's got in there.
Well, I mean, it'll when we pull the report, obviously we have to go through and look for dupes, right? And that tells us, Active Sync will tell us if the user agent's using like a legacy basic auth, agent for that call. But you think that they're valid modern auth, but it sounds like maybe there's an Active Sync add-in or something like that. I've seen that before. Not necessarily a native version of, like, say, example, the iOS version of the Mail app, but some add-in, that mobile add-in that's still using Active Sync. We've seen that, but it was very, very random in ours.
Yeah,
but it just said Exchange Web. It just said Exchange Active Sync, and there was something else in there. But if you've worked with Microsoft, then they might be already past that stage. But interesting.
Right. So let me also just more broadly, and Nathan just put a question in. Let me explain kind of where the data in Message Center comes from versus the data that you see in Azure, and why there is potentially a disagreement. And it was a slide I put in earlier, and I'm going to show you this too. I'll go back to the slide. I think I used a little earlier today. If I can find the darn, there it is. Right. Let me explain a little bit about where the discrepancy, and it's not really a discrepancy in the data, I'd say, they're from two different sources. So there may well be a discrepancy, but this is why I don't want you to, this is not a problem necessarily. In this diagram here, this shows how the legacy auth flow works. When a legacy auth or basic auth client comes and talks to Exchange Online, we go off. I'll just reiterate it for anyone not on the call earlier. We go off and we do the authentication. We authenticate the user. At this stage, this is the data I capture for who just logged in with Basic Auth, and that's the data that's used to generate your message center posts. Subsequent to that, Exchange goes off and talks to Azure and says, I got this guy who's just connected, any rules or conditional access I need to think about. And that's where conditional access rules will apply. And then the conditional access may report a failure. They didn't pass policy. I rejected the connection. Assuming they pass, then we come back and we lastly evaluate set CAS mailbox. That's on the Exchange server level. And if we block a user via set CAS mailbox, Azure's never going to know about it, right? So, point being, the traffic I send you in Message Center comes from here after the point of authentication. The traffic you're looking at is from Azure and it's here. And that's as a result of the authorization. So if you think about it, it's actually this is authentication and this is authorization. They might not always marry up, right? For a start, there's a whole bunch of sampling that goes on, particularly in our data. We sample successful login data. We don't record every single success. We record every single failure, but not every single success, whereas Azure does have everything. So there may be a disparity in the data. And also what it may show is what I see as a successful login and we send you in the message center may not result in actually successful access to the data. And I do point that out in the message center post that we send you. In a small line there, it does say this is indicative and doesn't represent actual access to the data. Okay, so that's why sometimes you might see a disagreement between the two. However, when we see the traffic coming into Exchange at this stage, right, this is what we're sending you. This is what will get blocked. Now, that could be a good thing. And in fact, I'm going to, if I may, I'm going to jump forward and get to one other important point I didn't quite have time to talk about a little earlier today. And there was a good question just in the chat here a few moments ago from Raghu Ram T, if I got that the right way around, which is, let's just talk about this for a second, which is we've got a few users that use Basic Auth for one thing. We don't want to open up Basic Auth for all. How's all that going to work? So let's just say you want to, in this case, it's Active Sync. Right, this is quite important. I just want to make sure everyone's paying attention to this one, right? So let's say you need to use Active Sync for a particular small number of users for a little while longer. How do you do that? Well, you do that using authentication policies in Exchange. Authentication policies, which actually, this diagram on the slide here comes from the page which talks about authentication policies and how to disable Basic Auth in Exchange Online. Authentication policies take place where this exclamation point here is in Exchange. So there are two kinds of authentication policy, really, or there's two levels. Authentication policy at the default level and one at the per user level. And the per user authentication policy overrides the default. So here's the approach that a number of large customers I'm talking to a lot at the moment, this is what they're doing. They know they're not quite ready for October. They need a little bit more time. And let's just say in this case, they know they need Active Sync, POP, and IMAP because they've got a couple of applications. So what they're doing is they're using the data from Azure to figure out which the accounts that are legitimately, we call that word out, legitimately still using POP or IMAP or Active Sync. And they're adding them to a group, right, or whatever it might be. They know these people are these people are legitimately still using that protocol. Then what they do, sorry, forget the add them to a group thing. That's rather unnecessary. They then create an auth policy for those particular users. So let's say they have a group of user accounts that still require POP. They create an auth policy, which says allow Basic Auth for POP set to true, and they assign it to those individual user accounts. Same for IMAP, same for Active Sync. And then they set the default organization-wide auth policy to block Basic Auth for all of those protocols. They are then going to go and opt out Active Sync, POP, and IMAP. And we will, if somebody could mute whoever that is, that'd be great. And then when we go and block the tenant, we will block everything except those 3 protocols, and the customer then is in control. Okay, I'll block them. I'll mute them myself. Okay. And then the customer is in control of when Basic Auth is blocked on those protocols in their tenant for those users. As they remediate the apps, they can start taking them out the auth policy, and then the default auth policy for the tenant is going to apply. They winnow them down, and then basically at that stage, nobody has an override to the default auth policy. I come back in January, I close off Basic Auth for good. Okay, so I wanted to get that one out and make sure we covered that. But hopefully back to the question of kind of, where these users show up and how they show up in Message Center posts versus what you see in Azure. Hopefully that explains some of the potential disparity.
And Greg, one thing people get confused, I think application access policy and application
auth policy,
or auth policy, like you're saying, right? Because I mean, they get used interchangeably at my company, anyways. So
well, an authentication policy is all about can this protocol use Basic Auth, whereas an application access policy is all about OAuth and modern auth and which mailboxes can a particular app have access to. So the names are disturbingly similar. I'm with you.
Yes, and we get that all the time at our company. So make sure, it's the authentication policy which we've implemented.
Correct.
And so thanks, Greg.
Okay. All right. Let's have a look. Who's got a hand up here? Who's Matthew?
Hi there. Thanks for calling on me. I wanted to go back to the Azure AD sign-in logs where you can see. I've already been there. I can show. I know how to, select client application and go legacy authentication.
Okay.
And I do have a chat. I do have a chat entry about this, but I'd like to hear it from you as well. So when I go to Azure AD admin and I look at the sign-ins and I look at the legacy ones, you can see a whole bunch that are listed there for some of my clients. Now there's an August 22nd blog entry that came out that said, oh yeah, some of those that you see can be what they call certificate-based logins, some of which might be modern, some of which might be legacy. But there's no way to really tell the difference. And in order to tell the difference, you need to set up an Azure AD workbook of some kind and ingest the messages and filter them there. Could you, I mean, is that something that you think needs to be done?
Let me try and I think the confusion or the clarity that we need to make here is around certificate-based auth for an application and in an exchange world. And here's the thing, I don't want to, you'll see a bunch of stuff in Azure AD sign-in logs that has nothing to do with Exchange. It's going to be listed under all kinds of, and I'm going to tell you now, I'm not remotely interested in any of that. Okay. Selfishly, you might be. I'm not terribly, because it doesn't affect what I'm going to turn off. But there is one point of clarification that's very important, which is ActiveSync can do certificate-based auth. And it will show up in Azure AD sign-in reports under legacy, bundled together with any device in ActiveSync that's using Basic Auth. And so when you do the filter, and I think somebody put, in here earlier in the chat, right, that there was a screenshot example that Mike put in where he has a filter for legacy authentication clients and Exchange ActiveSync is checked. That would include Basic Auth ActiveSync and CBA, Cert-Based Auth ActiveSync. And the simple reason for that is our friends in Azure consider certificate-based auth, air quotes, legacy, because it's not using OAuth. Now, if you have an OAuth flow that includes certificate,
but those aren't going to be disrupted by the October 1st cutoff.
Correct. We are not going to turn off. What we're turning off will not affect certificate-based auth ActiveSync device connections. Correct.
Okay. So the question is just, when I come across clients where, I have a list of people and I got to say, okay, well, how do we exclude the CBAs from this list?
Which protocol are they using? Is it ActiveSync or is it something else?
EAS, yes.
Right. So if they're using certificate-based auth ActiveSync, they are not impacted because we're not turning off certificate-based auth. We're turning off Basic Auth. The fact that Azure bundles CBA with Basic Auth is unfortunate, but this is one reason why I'm a bit of a zealot when it comes to, Basic Auth and I detest the term modern auth, frankly. Let's be honest, right? I don't know if I can get an amen on that, right? But what's modern today is not going to be modern in 10 years. Terrible expression. So sometimes I find when we get into some of these discussions around air quotes legacy, what the hell does that mean? So that's why I try and get a lot more precise. Basic Auth, username and password, CBA, certificate-based auth, both of which are bundled under legacy auth when it comes to Azure AD sign-in reports.
Right.
And CBA is not impacted.
Right. I understand that those won't be cut off. My
Correct.
challenge is going to be, I'm with a company that has about 100 different clients. Many of them are using Microsoft 365.
Okay.
We're going to be going through and looking at these logs, and we want to be sure to, like, when we get a list of people who are active, Azure AD says, oh, they're legacy. We want to say, okay, well, don't include the ones that are using CBA. We just want to look at the people who are really
using Basic Auth.
Basic. And right now, according to the blog from the 22nd, the only way to do that is to use the Azure AD workbooks.
Well,
I wanted to mention something real quick. So actually, I do agree that Azure workbooks will allow you to search through a large number of those. However, if you do have about 100 users, as you mentioned, then I realize that this will be somewhat tedious, but the blog does also mention that you are actually able to see the activity details sign-ins in the Azure sign-in logs, which will actually specifically say that authentication method is certificate. So you do not necessarily have to use the workbooks. I mean, if you have like a limited number of users, I get it. It's still a lot of clicking and kind of hunting and pecking, but you are able to actually see if it's certificate or not.
Right, I understand. And I have 100. We have 100 companies we manage, each one with different numbers of people.
Oh, I got it. Okay. I thought you said 100 users. Okay, got it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Matthew. You're welcome. Eric, you're up.
So the documentation around this, as I'm working with a lot of legacy app users at my company, when dealing with Exchange Web Service or IMAP and POP, all the documentation really kind of flows around application-based authentication, which requires service principals and conditional access rules and all that crap. In general, I'm finding using delegated auth, since these people have been using a service account to do this work for 20 years. Is that going to break, or do I need to do anything with auth policies to make sure that, we're doing OAuth, but I'm doing it via delegated so that I don't have to muck with the conditional access policies and things? Is that okay?
That's a perfectly viable solution. Many customers are doing that.
Okay.
There's no reason to get conditional access involved at all. I mean, it's one of those, that's an additional thing that you may or may not choose to implement.
Right.
It
worried me because that's where all the documentation was pointing at. And I'm like, really? So then I have to go through, and then by default, it gives full access to every mailbox in the company, and I have to then limit it.
Right. And that's where application access policies come in order to try and prevent that. So, from a preference standpoint, app permissions are generally far preferred to delegate permissions, right? That's a sort of unequivocal statement. But, delegate permissions are what we've had for a long time, and hence why application access policies came about, such that you can then control which application has access to which mailbox. Now, that does lead you into, but there's only 100 app access policies you can have, Greg, if you know what they are. And that's work in progress too, right? But there aren't that many organizations that have that many apps that presents a problem. And if there is, we do have a way we can eke it up for customers, right?
Yeah,
before we come out with an alternative.
Change because of the timeline.
Right.
It's really just me doing this, and we've got a lot of email integrated apps.
Of course.
And none of those people are developers, so I'm having a bear of a time trying to make it as easy for them as I can.
Right. Okay. Understood. But does that help? Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, so I don't need to do any off access policies for after October 1st to allow that delegated auth to work. It'll be fine.
No. I mean, yeah, because that's all using OAuth, right? So you're just,
Correct.
us cutting off basic auth won't change that. But if you wanted to use, app access policies to further then control and restrict what those delegate permission apps can get to, that's how you would approach that problem.
And the authenticated SMTP, since you're not touching that, I don't need to build anything. I don't need to make any changes in those off app rules for that, since you're not turning that on.
You raised the term SMTP. Yeah. So to be clear, yeah. And those of you that are following the blog, it is everything I'm trying to do to try and be super calm every time I answer the same question, which is, yeah, we're not touching SMTP. So you're right. We're not blocking SMTP. We're not turning anything off for Basic Auth for SMTP in October. I think there were some comments earlier, but haven't you already turned it off for people that aren't using it? Damn right, we have. We've turned it off for a lot. I'll tell you, in January this year, I turned off SMTP Basic Auth for 1.6 million tenants in a week.
Oh, wow.
Right?
That's a lot of tenants.
As an example, if this project has taught anything, it's like big numbers, right? That everything we're dealing here is huge numbers. And so it's impossible to get everything right 100% of the time with that vast number of tenants. But then, for the vast majority of customers, they don't know what we've been doing, and I'm good with that. But you're right. We're not going to touch. I'm done touching SMTP auth for now.
Okay.
Not going to touch it in October.
And I don't need to have any rules defined.
If you can carry on, you can carry on using Basic Auth with SMTP for the time being. That's totally fine. Now, it's still not a great solution, right? But I'm not forcing you to accelerate that. If you're going to use SMTP and Basic Auth, everyone, it's take the approach much like authentication policies, which are set the default of the organization to block it and enable it on a per user basis. Do not blanket allow everyone to use Basic Auth SMTP in your tenant. You are waiting to become a target and, a victim rather, right? So block it at the tenant level, enable it on the per user level, whether it's SMTP or whether it's auth policies.
Gotcha.
Okay, cool.
That's all I have.
Thanks, Eric. All right, Dale, you're up.
For your customers who are still on premise, are there any considerations to be made, such as Outlook for Android or iOS?
I think you meant on premises, right?
Right.
So, sorry, it's always a joke. Every time somebody says on premise, a small bunny rabbit dies somewhere in the world, which is awfully sad, but true. Absolutely no effect. We're not touching on-prem. I always call it on-prem. It's a lot easier that way, right? We're not touching anything that will affect your on-prem mailboxes. How's that for you?
Thank you.
Simple statement. Okay, cool. Derek.
Howdy.
Hey, Derek.
Pleasure to meet you, Greg. So I have 2 quick questions for you.
Sure.
Looks like one of them was actually answered in the chat, but I thought I'd still ask it. So currently within a given tenant, we have a namespace that is limited to about 300 access policies for app regs so that we can scope them to the various mailboxes, which is so limited by characters, if I remember correctly. Based on
okay, I thought it was the number of policies we were restricted by, but go on. Yep.
I mean, that's what I got from Matt Krause, one of the graph guys.
Okay.
But knowledge might be outdated, so I'm always willing to update that.
So the number of app access policies, is that really the question? Like, what's the limit?
No, not in this case. The question is, what's the roadmap for either increasing it or giving a more elegant solution similar to enterprise applications?
Now, I could be wrong here, but is there not a session at MEC with a guy called Nick Elder? And is anyone able to confirm that, or because I can't quite remember off the top of my head?
I'm looking because I think
there was one like an hour ago that they talked about EWS with and they talked about the going from 100 to 300, which you have to talk to Microsoft.
Yeah, Nick Elder is at it's 1 p.m.
Yep.
1 p.m. Pacific, yeah?
Yeah, 1 p.m. Pacific today.
Yep.
Then that's
Beautiful
exactly the place. Thanks, guys. That's exactly the place to ask the question, because that's the PM and the team that are responsible for app access policies.
Okay, cool. That kind of just wrapped up those two questions then for me that I had, because that's one of the main things I'm dealing with our TRO department within our company.
Okay.
Is looking at a more elegant solution similar to how we would limit POP3 or IMAP OAuth by applying a enterprise application as a user instead of being limited to 300 policies.
Great. So that will be, that's the place to go ask that question. I think that would be super.
The other one that I have is for POP3 and IMAP OAuth.
Yeah.
I've been trying to get at least a little bit of an idea for this one. Is there currently a roadmap for knowing if that's going to be an LTS or if that's going to be just short-term solution and just completely moving over to Graph?
I'm not familiar with LTS.
Long-term supported.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have no. So your question is like, if you take the time to do OAuth for POP or IMAP or something, are we about to pull the rug out from under your feet and go, oh, sorry, no more POP or IMAP? Is that really the question?
Yeah. I would think that in like 3-4 years, or if that's not in the roadmap currently.
So as the saying goes, never say never, right? But let me make it quite clear. There is no plan currently to stop POP or IMAP at all. I mean, there are many line of business apps from big partners that are very much POP and IMAP solutions. And many of those partners have done a lot of work to try and help to integrate the new code, the new OAuth flows into their products. Mm-hmm. And I know certainly with some of them, it's been hard because we certainly with client credential flow came in quite late to the game. Right? We didn't really deliver that code to some of the partners till quite late. And I know they're doing a great job trying to help our customers get on to the newer versions of their products. And some of their products are quite hard to, they're not trivial products to upgrade for our customers, right? We have no plan right now to end that. I don't foresee any time in the near future at all where POP or IMAP go away.
I mean, if you wanted to give them a good scare, you could like drop that.
What you mean, like that we're going to turn them off? Yeah, I mean, sure.
Put up their board, give them the news, see them freak out. You'd get a laugh. I would get a laugh. It'd be pretty great.
I mean, reality is, right? Deprecating anything like this is really hard, and the clue is in the title and the slide, right? Customers have built stuff that depends on Basic Auth or these protocols, and businesses run on them. We're not in the business of genuinely trying to just upset our customers. We genuinely want to try and just help protect your data. It's your data, they're your accounts. All I'm doing is helping secure them, because to make me sound like a broken record, man, I see accounts get compromised all the time. So it takes time though, and certainly with things like POP or IMAP or EWS or all of those things, right? Until we have functional equivalence and a momentum to get people onto Graph, we're not just going to turn that stuff off. We can't just turn that stuff off.
Awesome. I'll take that and make that a note. Thank you for taking my cheeky joke.
Not at all. I've turned off Basic Auth for thousands of people at a time, so I'm familiar with the concept. All right.
Hey, Greg. Hey, Greg. Yes. It's Julian. How you doing?
Hey, Julian.
I just wanted to mention, Nick had, I presented earlier, one of the sessions I had was about EWS and moving to app access policies model. So Nick had pinged me and he had told me to mention, I don't know if he's going to mention it in his particular session, but he said that his team's working on application RBAC for Exchange, which is going to help address the scalability problem of the app access policy limit. So
brilliant.
Yep. That's all I had. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. All right, and you should listen to Julian's session recorded earlier if you haven't already done so, if you're interested in that kind of stuff. All right, any other questions here? Everybody else? Dale, your hand is still up. Is that, as they say, an old stale hand, or is that a nice fresh hand we're looking at there?
Old and stale, my apologies.
Okay, not at all, not a problem. All right. Anyone else have any questions, or is there anything in chat that we haven't yet covered or talked about? I'm just scanning the chat if anyone else has any.
There were a few mentions of Mac Outlook,
right,
and why it may be stuck on using Basic Auth. So I didn't drop a hint that we're working on a blog post on that.
Yeah, so we are working on a blog post. Exactly, brilliant. So if there's no other, oh, Eric, okay, go for it. Otherwise, I was just going to dance. Go for it.
I didn't want you to escape too soon.
Yeah, no problem.
Since you're the big dog there, I thought you'd be the great person to answer if there are any plans to make this process, easier, since we're gonna have to live with it from now on, to deal with third-party apps. I mean, it's a hell of a transition going from username and password to, okay, you need to, generate an access token, now use that and generate a refresh token. Now take that and edit your web config file, and trying to explain that to non-developers or even people that are developers is challenging. And I'm hoping that it gets to the point where it can become as simple as, put in your, the app ID, put in the tenant ID, and a mailbox to access. I know some of it's outside your control, but I'm hoping that there is some recognition that the process is.
It's a little more convoluted, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't even say little. I mean, the documentation is so voluminous that just trying to get people to read it and determine what they actually need to do is, that can take a week just for them to try to, and this is a high-level developer, just for him to figure out what he really needed to do. Because, you guys are detailed in that and going through every scenario, but, going from just okay, put in your username and password to this is,
so I hear you, and all I can really say is I think we've made efforts, and clearly it sounds like we can probably do more. The feedback I generally get from hardcore developers is, yeah, we understand this, don't worry about it. It's the part-time developer or the infrequent developer who realizes this is considerably different than what they've done before. And perhaps, we, and I would ask the community, do a better job all up, to help educate people and give them code samples and put projects on Git and do stuff and there are already examples like that. There's already a lot of code that can be reused. Developers are, as I think I learned early on at this company, developers, if they can borrow somebody else's code and claim credit for it, they'll happily do that, right? And just copy and paste masters. But we need to give them the good samples and examples for how to get it running. I think as over time, more familiarity is going to or knowledge, common knowledge of how this works will become easier. It's still a more complex than putting in a username and password, for sure, but the benefits are sort of there too, right? Username and password is.
It is, but I mean, being an Exchange admin and having to learn how to use Postman, that was a hell of a learning curve just for me.
Same.
I'm not a developer. I'm an Exchange admin.
Same.
I was certified on Exchange 4.0 beta.
Good-o.
And
before my time, I wasn't even born at that stage, right? So, but no, no, I hear you, Eric, and I'd say I think as Exchange admins, it is a tough curve. I know there are some folks, and some of them are on this call, who've done an amazing job, sort of transitioning from what you might call like IT pro into a IT development pro, who really have a lot of skills and game in scripting and application programming against Exchange. And, I would ask those of them on this call, you heard there's a need. People want more, help getting their apps onto Modern Auth. So, there's an opportunity there to write some stuff and put some stuff out there. All right. And on that note, because we're about to turn the 50-minute mark, I'm going to say thank you all very much for joining. Thanks in particular to my amazing friends and colleagues who helped out and answered questions in chat or on the phone. Thank you. Couldn't do it without you. And on that note, I'm going to say thanks again for listening in. Hope you've learned something new. If you still have questions, I think we have another one of these tomorrow. And if we don't have any questions, I'm just going to tell random stories for 50 minutes. So if you want to hear stories of some of the random things our customers do, I'll try and tell you, and maybe you're one of those customers. You'll recognize it. On that note, thanks again. Don't forget to fill out the eval, and make sure you get Basic Auth turned off, because if not, I'm going to do it for you. Thanks very much. Bye.
Thanks, Greg.